Games, board games. We might be talking about board games with fixed placement auctions, but we're not going to shout. We are talking about the mechanisms, and we will try to not create any schisms in the fabric of space and time because that would be bad. But setting that aside, there's a conversation to be had. Hello, good morning, good afternoon,
Hello.
whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time for Betty Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 901.
Wow.
Pondering mechanics, fixed placement auctions featuring Alan Paull. And I was looking
Hello.
at these and I was thinking, quite often people say constraints breed creativity. So are fixed placement auctions, because it's in the game, fixed, is it kind of just another constraint that we can put into a game to enforce players to have some more creativity?
I think it gives you a nice constraint is an old word. It gives you opportunities as a designer and constraints as a player, I guess, is what we've got there. And it does, yes. I think it gives designers an opportunity to create very different auction types, and that's really good with awkward decisions for players, which is always good. So in a lot of this type of auction, which we're going to talk about in a minute, multi-lot auctions, but fixed placement, you can, because of the nature of that, you can have an auction action, i.e. a bid, as part of a wider set of actions you could take. So you have to decide not only what bid you're going to make, but also whether you're going to participate in that auction at that time, which is really good decisions.
And the other nice thing about multiple lot auctions in general, like just broadening the scope a little bit, is that obviously there's more going on for the player, there's more to consider. It's not just, hey, do I want this? Yes or no? And then I need to wait for the next lot to be put up for the auction before I consider that. Well, you can immediately, firstly, it's kind of adding complexity in that you consider all these things at once. But secondly, it's also giving you a bit more understanding of the value. Because if you see someone else going for a vaguely similar thing for 6 money, you get an idea that what you're going for, which is marginally worse, is maybe worth 5 money, and that paying more than 6 is a bit unreasonable. So you get an idea of value. It kind of gives, it's nice for onboarding.
Yeah, and for some fixed placement auctions, the designer will include values that you bid. So you very often triangular values so that they go up not just by increments, by a significant jump, and that again gives you a hint as to the values that the designer expects you to use, which is helpful. So you're not just in the dark.
Now, I don't want to talk too much about multiple lot auctions because that is our next thing. And as you can see, we are still in the middle of the auction list, and multiple auctions will be in a couple of weeks. But before we get too much into that, let's spend just a couple of minutes talking about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. I played 2 games yesterday, both with a friend who came over. One was Zaberias, which is a game that I got sent review copies of from Israel, and I will talk more about that another day. But for me, I like it. With all the kind of nuance that information suggests. It's a bit simplistic, it lacks agency, and I feel like the games have the possibility of going on longer than I would like. But there is definitely some really interesting unit abilities. The units all have different abilities, and there's so much imagination and really nice work. It feels a little bit underdeveloped, is my overall opinion.
Right, I see.
the other game that we played is Bandido. Have you played this one much or at all?
No, I haven't.
So Bandido is Helvetic's most popular game, a simple card game. Place cards and they either continue a path or close a path. You're trying to trap a bandit. And I previously thought, yeah, I think that there's a lot of luck, and for it to not be luck, you've got to basically get to know the deck, which is something I'm uninterested in. But my friend who came over, we had about 15 minutes left, and I was, do you have a game that could take 15 minutes? And she said, oh, how about Bandido, a game that I know you don't like that much, but which you've agreed that I'm going to show you the light on. And one thing she said, which makes me understand maybe why she likes it so much, is that it's like a friend that you get to know
Oh, I
better.
see.
And
Yes.
so it's about learning to, and it's kind of like a trick-taking game in that, yes, there's a lot of luck, and if you've got a terrible hand, you are less likely to do well, but you've got to eke out those possibilities and understand what might connect in a little place. Like, how many tiles are there left? And understanding that there's this many of each thing does allow you to potentially win 100% of the games. And this is from my friend who has played it literally thousands of times.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
But
Good.
yes,
Yes.
those
Yes.
were my recent highlights that I want to
Nice.
see.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
Well, last weekend, well, Thursday to Monday, if you can classify that as a weekend, we went to what was called Retford Moot B. Now, normally that weekend is a big weekend LARP, but circumstances being what they were not able to organise a full weekend LARP. So instead, we had a board gaming and tabletop RPG and small LARP weekend over in Nottinghamshire, and that was really good. We met loads of our friends from that. We had, I think, about between 40 and 50 people there, so slightly smaller than the one we went to in November, but it was good, and I spent pretty much the whole time board gaming. Highlights there being Dune Imperium. That was nice. I was like playing Dune Imperium, and as contrast, So Clover. So do you know So
I
Clover?
do know So Clover.
Yes.
I've played it once or twice, and I do enjoy it. I can see people who say, yes, it's got the similar gameplay value as Code Names, but it
Yes,
means that at least everyone's playing all at once, which I do appreciate. But
it's
I'm
very good.
really weirded out by the name. It just feels when I
Well,
first heard of it, I assumed it was something to do with Ganshon Clever.
well, yeah, So Clever. It's a clever title, isn't it? Because so
Yeah.
clever, so clever. That because it's got the 4-leaf clover shaped boards. Yeah, it's a bit of a reach. It's kind of funny. It's one of the things which is kind of slightly funny for a few minutes, and then you think, yeah. Anyway, but it's very nice. It's a very good game. For those that don't know it, you're dealt 5 of those rectangular things, and they have a word on each side. So you turn them up and put them into your clover display randomly, keeping the secret from everybody else, which means that you have got 2 words facing each side of the board, and you write on those sides a word that you think suggests the 2
Yeah,
words
words
adjacent.
link
So
them
you'll match
together,
up. Yeah,
kind of like you
links
might
them.
do in code names, but
Yes, yes.
obviously in code names you could do it for just one
Yeah,
word or
that's right.
all 4.
Yeah, and
But
then
then the interesting thing is when you dismantle it, everyone else needs to put it
everybody
back together.
gathers around, but you also mix in a 5th card, which can completely scramble what you intended, because we had a really good example of that. The clue word was ganglia, right? And we had the player had put, I think it was cell and something else, and then the 5th tile came up with brain. So, and that was not one of the solutions. So yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. So things like that
But
can happen, but you get collectively you work together to work out what those 4 are,
And so
you
this
put
is
the
one
things in.
that you've got a lot of love for just now.
Yes, and it's really good because it can appeal quite easily to non-gamers or non-board gamers, as well as to board gamers.
I think
And it
that
doesn't last
co-op
very long
games
either.
have adaptability.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
actually, let's take a complete left turn and talk about brilliant thing, what's a little thing which is brilliant. I'd like to talk about cooperative stuff today.
Yeah, oh, right,
Because
good. Yes.
I know this is, but like, I think that with any game, if you've got non-gamers coming together, it's nice to have everyone working together. There's no ego on the line. There's no, oh no, I did worse than you.
Yeah.
There's no aspect of, oh my gosh, I'm slightly embarrassed that I did so badly, because people can get egos involved. Or at a certain point, it can be like, oh, I've won all the games. I really need to win my next game as well. And that's not a great place to be. But when it's, hey, we're all in this together, and if you're struggling, someone else will give you some advice, and it makes it a bit more friendly, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the key to live action role play as well. We do theatrical live action role play, and there your main objective, regardless of the game you're in, really, is to make sure everybody in the game is having fun and participating. So the really good players can do that while staying in their role, which is an incredible skill, and I have great respect. I'm not particularly good at that kind of thing myself, but it's a really good skill to have, to work alongside somebody who's really in that zone of helping you. So you have situations in our LARPs where you may have an enemy, you have a scene with an enemy, and you're both cooperating to make that scene as dramatic and relevant to both parties as possible.
Yeah, because it's not about the victory, it's about the shared creation of this story.
Exactly.
And so, yes, I think it's a wonderful thing, whether it's collaborative storytelling or cooperation where it's a singular objective. But
in terms of board games, macro, is that the one? That was we didn't have that this time, but in November we had somebody brought on a copy of that, and that's really good for just people dropping in, participating a little bit. They can go out, and it's very good for cooperative puzzle solutions. Fantastic little game.
I might get my copy of that back out. I started the second mission, the first one. That's not just the training mission. I couldn't quite do it. I feel like we should push ahead to the main topic. As always, anyone watching, please do comment, ask questions. That's why we do this live. And yeah, if you aren't watching live, then feel free to comment, ask questions in the comments. I do reply to all respectful comments. So as always, Pondering, we'll talk about how did Jeff Engelstein and Isaac Shalev define this mechanism in the book. And whilst Alan Paull reads that out, let's talk. Let's look at it. So here, I just want to note, this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 11 auction mechanisms, which shows the density of what there is. And I almost feel like we need to have an auction mechanism wrap up at the end of this. But
how many have we done? How many have we done? I don't know.
We've done 1, 2. We've done. This is the 7th, so we've got 4 more to go.
Oh, okay. So this is fixed placement auction. Fixed placement is a meta mechanism that modifies a multiple lot auction by creating rules about which lots players may bid on and representing bids visually on a card or on a board or cards. It's often combined with constrained value bids. A fixed placement auction ends when every player passes and/or no player has the right to bid further. The highest bidder for each lot wins the lot. That's the Paull definition, but I think is
identical.
Not quite well. It is identical to the first paragraph on Board Game Geek.
And then Board Game Geek does add these 2 paragraphs, which are good examples of this mechanism, are in Amun-Re and Vegas Showdown. In these games, there's a track below each lot's up for auction. Each player places a marker on the lot they are interested in at a value they want to pay. if another player wants to bid on that lot, they do it by placing their bid mark on a space higher than the
Yeah.
current bidder. The outbid player retrieves their bid token and may place it on the same lot at higher price or another lot. When all players have placed their token, the bids are resolved. And
Yeah.
although it says you may place it on the same lot at a higher price, there are certain games where you can't just come into the same lot
Yes.
to
Yes.
rebid, which is noted to avoid it becoming just a contest for one single lot. Because if things are of wildly differing values, that can definitely become a thing.
Yes. And very often the jump between a bid and the next bid up is a relatively high one. It's not just an incremental jump. It'll very often be a triangular jump, so that it's a coherent and major decision to come in again and bid on something.
And I think that it's a very clear explanation. There are some games, like Keyflower is actually one that plays with it in a weird way. I wonder if we should actually start with Homesteaders, despite what we've said, because that's a bit more.
I confess I don't know Homesteaders at all, but I know you do, Bez. So you start with that. Go for it.
I played. So what I did is last night I looked at which. So there's only 18 games which have fixed placement auctions. There's not that many games with like fixed placement auctions on Board Game Geek, considering all things. And the book does mention, yes, like the book that we keep referencing, Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, that it is underutilized and there is a lot more space for it. I think that, yeah. So Homesteaders, Alex Rockwell, great, lovely design. This is where it all happens. You've got different players. This is presumably a 4-player game because of the 4 colors. And on your turn, during the auction phase, which is a separate phase, you're going to put your marker down on one of these tracks. Either you decide to go on, it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 12, 16, and 21. I played 1.5 games. I'm halfway through a game with someone who has quite a high ELO, and they are apparently the second best at this game in the world.
Right.
So,
okay.
as you might imagine, my first game, there was a big points differential. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of skill in this game, and you are not bidding for stuff as such. You're bidding for the right to buy stuff, which is kind of interesting. So if I go to Board Game Arena here, here's my little marker. And if I click on, if I win this one, I could build a residential, and I can recruit another worker.
Yes,
so I do get some stuff, but with this one, I can build a residential or a special, and I may trade one of these little bits of wood for a railroad track, so that's like a free upgrade. And if you look at the stuff that you are actually potentially building, so you are considering building any of these items.
A lot of information to digest.
It is. And so when I'm looking at, okay, what is the residential? For this one, for example, I need to pay 2 steel girders, and if I get this, then I'm going to get 1 trade token and 1 money every turn, and I'll get some bonuses, some victory points for all the stuff that I have. This one costs a lot. It gives me 10 victory points, and it also gives me an income of 2 victory points every turn. And yeah, all of these things, some of them have worker placements, because it's not quite worker placements. You're not denying anyone, but you decide where your own workers go. So there's basically 3 decisions to make in this game. Firstly, how much are you going to pay for the auction?
Yes.
Secondly, hopefully you've already decided, which of these are you actually going to buy? Because the worst thing is if you win an auction and then you can't even build anything, and then you've just wasted all your money.
It lets you do that, does it?
It lets you
does. Do that. Oh, okay. That's
so
not very forgiving.
Waste your money on an auction, and then realize, wait a minute, I can't actually build any of these things. You can take debt tokens, but in order to actually get stuff, you need to trade for it. So you might not have the trade tokens to build for that.
Right.
And then you build into this little tableau that you can see here, where I've only got the one worker at this point in the game. I'm hoping to get my second,
Yes.
because my second, a worker only charges 1 money per turn. So if I stick a worker there, I'm getting the net income of 1 extra money. So obviously I want
you want
at
more.
least a 2nd worker. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and I just think it's really interesting how also in 2 players you've got a dummy bid, because obviously this is completely uninteresting. If each player is winning one of the auctions, then what's the interaction? But here, my opponents decided to place the dummy bid on this other lot and decided that they are paying for this. And the value of the dummy bid does really matter, and where you place it.
Yeah, because it's a blocking bid, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the final little wrinkle, which I find fascinating, is if you pass, because sometimes you need to pass, then you get a thing. And the first time you pass, you get a little trade token. Second time you pass, you get one of those railroad tracks that give you income. Third time, you can get person. And so you don't want to necessarily pass all the time, but if you've passed, 3, 4 times, 5 times in the game, it feels, okay, I can deal with this, and I'm giving that up. But sometimes, you know what? Let your opponents have it for a high price. Let them take it, and you just sit there and take the free victory points.
That's interesting. So that's a bit like Furnace, which is another one which is listed as a fixed placement auction 2020 game, which I have actually played. And there again, you get a compensation if you have bid and decide to not bid again if somebody bids over you, which is really, or you effectively coming second or third in the auction. Great, yeah. That looks quite a tricky game with a lot of reassessment of values going on, which is part of what multiple lot auctions always do, and particularly the fixed placement ones.
Yeah, there is a lot going in, and yeah, I think you're right. It is definitely related to auction compensation.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I think that when we look
We'll leave
at
that
it,
one
it's
till later.
like
yes.
we already looked at this and
Did we
did
do?
it very
we
briefly
did.
because
We did. Yes. There was
so,
not a
but
lot.
I will say that it's not. It's subtly different, I think, because is it you're not? Are you a losing bidder when you actually choose to?
You may not be. That's the point about that kind of auction. You're not necessarily. You might want the lesser award and not the main one in some circumstances.
Because it doesn't feel like a losing bidder anyway.
No. Anyway, good. That's great. That looks good. Not played
I don't think we've got anything more to say about that, but that feels like a fairly standard way to do things.
Yeah.
Shall we go to Amun-Re?
Let's go to Amun-Re. Amun-Re, I have played Amun-Re. This, well, obviously set in Egypt. You have to say Amun-Re when you say it, obviously. like with Ra, you have to say Ra. So yes, this is here you're trying to gain control of provinces along the Nile, and you have the ability to place farmers, build pyramids, and get gold, and basically sacrifice your gold to the gods in order to get more victory points. That's the kind of overall theme. But the way you do this is the auction bit. Every round starts with an auction phase, and you're bidding for provinces. So this is again a classic fixed placement auction. Each province, and you bid on it. There's a you can see it at the top of the screen there. You will have a piece which you will put on this set of gold values, which go from what do they go from? 0 up
triangle
to 36.
numbers.
It's a triangle
0, 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21, 28, 36.
And only and basically the auction continues until each province, and you have one province per player. Each each province has only got one piece on it, and then those people will win the auction. Now, if you are overbid in the classic way, if you are overbid, you get your piece back and you use it on a different province. And you can't put your next bid on the same province, but you could bid somewhere else and then come back. But the auction ends immediately. You've got only one piece on each province, which is a very interesting mechanism, because you may it kind of means you have to be very careful with the tactics, because you can suddenly find that the auction round had ended and you've actually won something which you expected somebody to overbid you on and they didn't, in which case you've won it, and you may not have wanted to win that one, you may have wanted a different one. But that's part of what it's about, so you have to be careful. Every bid is really, really important. Now, the values of the provinces vary, and they give what are termed immediate bonuses as soon as you gain control of a particular province. So that might be some extra stone for building pyramids. It might be a favor card. The favor cards are really good injections where you effectively break the rules, or it might give you gold. I think, does it give you gold? Or it might give you combinations of things. So there are lots of various immediate bonuses, but there are also permanent bonuses. There might be, for example, a thing that gives you income every round. You might get a gold mine, which again gives you income every round. A temple, which gives you victory points, or a favor card, which increases the number of favor cards you can buy, which is really, those things are really, really helpful more strategically. So that is how the auction works. Now, the reason you're doing the auction is to gain control of provinces, and a lot of the game is about using the resources from those provinces to buy more stuff. So, for example, when you've got more provinces, you may be able to buy more favor cards, which allow you to do lots of different things, gaining victory points from them. You may be able to buy farmer tokens. The farmers are obviously the things they give you control of fields, which gives you income during the game. You may be able to get stones, which allow you to build pyramids, and they get you victory points in the game. So there's again, like a lot of these multi-lot and fixed placement auctions, there's a lot going on.
I find that one thing's kind of noticeable in Amun-Re, and I'm actually going to say that 2 weeks ago, I don't know if I let you know that, but I did actually design a game about having a blind auction in order to become the auctioneer in an English auction.
Oh, right.
Which actually works really nicely. I was quite proud of how it went. But yeah, what I did to keep cash injection was the same thing as what they've done in Amun-Re, which is to make sure that it gives you gold, the same thing that you're using to bid on the thing, so that it stops. It feels like it's going to probably stop one person completely being knocked out of the game. And it feels like if you're in a, maybe I'm completely wrong and it doesn't work that way in Amun-Re, but it feels like it has the possibility of the rich get richer with the income for sure, but it also has a kind of get out clause in that, hey, you aren't going to be able to bid all your money on the first turn and then never bid again. You do get a regular income of stuff to bid with during the game, which is going to come in a stochastic dynamic way.
Yes, but also the interesting thing about Amun-Re is because this isn't just turn order. It isn't just turn order and you stop after a certain number of turns. It stops when there's only one piece on each province. When each player has got one province with just their piece on it, and that means that you can always duck out to something that people haven't bid on, and that might be that might be sufficient for you to keep going, to keep in the game on. It's unlikely you'll get knocked out completely. Now, it may not. For example, if there's 4 players and you've got 2 players fighting over one province and 2 players fighting over another province, as they start to resolve, you often find that you can duck out to something which people were kind of or everybody was using as their second best, but you'll get it cheaper if you can end the auction by doing that. And that's quite an interesting dynamic, because you know that all the other players are looking at that possibility as well. So there's a great danger that people can overbid and somebody else just ducks out and gets the secondary one really cheaply, and that's
And it is
a
interesting
really good
because, as you
catch-up.
say,
That's a really good
it is
catch-up
going to
mechanism.
always end up with everyone getting at least one thing.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so even if you have nothing to spend, you can still buy something for literally just 0.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because by definition, if you're on the 0 of a province and nobody overbids you because they don't want it, you will win that province. And if they do overbid you, you can go somewhere else. Often
Now,
to a
honestly,
0.
these 2 games seem to use the mechanism in a very similar way. I mean, sure, there's the key difference is that in Amun-Re, there's 1 lot per player, which does give it a very different feel compared to Homesteaders, where there's 2 lots plus a dummy bid for 2 players, or 2 lots for 3 players, or 3 lots for 4 players. There's always, and someone is going to have to pass, and that kind of is an interesting little wrinkle. Whereas here, it's not that passing is the, oh well, you didn't get quite what you wanted, but you got something else. Here, it's presumably these lots are quite different in terms of value and are going to be wildly differentiating. So that's going to lead to the situation of maybe it's reasonable for someone to get something for just 0 or 1 and someone else gets something for 7. Well, not 7, because that's not possible. 10.
Yes, it really depends on what your strategy is. So which is quite what you'd expect in a multi-lot auction or this kind of thing, because for example, if your strategy is built on primarily getting stone for pyramids, primarily it's your main way of getting points, then you'll want to bid for those, but you might not be interested in the other ones, where that will effectively reduce the value of those other provinces for everybody else. There are also a couple of extra nice little things in here, which I suspect in playtesting they found they had to do it to give flexibility of tactics. One is bribery. So if you've got a bribery favor, you can play it to make a higher bid when you've just been outbid. And of course, they're secrets, so nobody knows you've got it. So I suppose you could sucker somebody in, I guess, but that's useful. And also there's a protection card, so you can actually block the next highest bidding space. And so that means you can effectively outprice it for somebody, which is those are helpful little tactical things, which this game lends itself.
That is really interesting.
Really very interesting then. Yeah.
Having cards that influence the way the auction itself resolves, I'm not sure I've seen that before.
I'm not sure I have either, actually, to be honest. It's a very, very interesting mechanic, because if somebody's got favor cards they haven't yet used, you you have to be careful, because they might have one of those or not, so it just adds that extra bit of uncertainty. So I suspect that in the earlier playtesting of the game they probably didn't have those, and they felt actually it's a bit too mechanistic, because some of the valuations might in some cases be quite obvious. But if you've got bribery and protection cards
face down, so you're not quite sure what people have. But it is a really fascinating thing, and
This was one of
Yeah,
those games where
is there
we can.
another obvious thing that they could have had? And I think that because the auctions are quite regulated, I think that fixed placements auctions are almost the most regulated of all the auctions, possibly.
Yes, the major decision you have to make with this kind of design mechanism is whether you're putting this auction in as one of multiple actions or whether you split it out as an auction phase. Now, Amun-Re does the clean thing of having an auction phase, so you do all the province buying at this point, and then you have a market phase.
Shall we talk
Then
about
you have.
Keyflower?
Yes, let's do that.
Because
So this is very
that
structured.
mixes the other
Yeah.
the phases.
Yeah.
And this is by
This is
Sebastian
Sebastian.
Bleasdale and
Yep.
Richard
Richard
Breeze.
Breeze.
And I understand David Brain takes a little bit of credit for introducing the two ideas to each other.
Yeah, we played a lot of Keyflower when it was being developed, and probably less when it was published, to be honest. But yes, the mechanism here, the auction mechanism here, is to place meeples against the particular side that's facing you on these hexagonal tiles. So you're basically in Keyflower. What you're doing is you're trying
represents to keep track of who is playing it. You play on different sides, as shown
so
here.
in Keyflower, you're trying to acquire tiles which go in your own personal display, fitting to your own little village, I guess it would be called. And each tile has on it some kind of process which will often be converting a type of resource into another type of resource, multiplying resources, or the ability to move resources to other tiles, or just plain spend stuff to gain victory points. So those are the typical kinds of things you do. Each tile, the vast majority of tiles anyway, can be upgraded. You pay something to upgrade it, flip it over, and it's a better version on the other side. So they do have varying values depending on what your objectives are. So you may be able to generate lots of stone, in which case you'll want something which will turn stone into victory points. On the other hand, you may be generating lots of wood, in which case you'll want something that turns wood into victory points. There are also tiles which get you turn order in the next round, and it's only a 4-round. It's 4 seasons. You got spring, summer, autumn, winter. So it's only 4 seasons. So it's relatively easy to think through those seasons. But in each season, you are free to take actions, not just auction actions, but other actions. In other words, you can put pieces on your tiles you've already bought in order to do the process upon them. Right. Now, the basic thing here is that, which is interestingly not necessarily correct on that display, maybe it is. Once somebody has played a piece against a tile, that is the only color piece that can be played against those tiles. So the first player to play.
Correct. It's just that the two yellows look a bit different. If you are.
Oh right, yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, and that's a shadow. Not yeah, I see. Now, for auctioning, you can only outbid somebody if you put more pieces against the tile than your opponent has done. In which case you're then the highest bidder. The people who are not the highest bidder, you leave the pieces there, but you can, as an action later, you can take them off and put them somewhere else. So you don't lose the pieces from your losing bid. You can use them somewhere else if somewhere else is available. And sometimes all the tiles have got sufficient pieces against them that you find you can't bid anywhere else. But at least you have the option, and you can add more pieces. So the bidding is very dependent on you getting the right color of pieces for competing with your rivals, or on the other hand, making sure that you put your color that you want down against something that you really want.
And so what this means is that if you have exclusivity of one particular color, then you can go and buy something for just one meeple.
Yes. Now the key color in Keyflower is green, because green ones are in very, very short supply. I don't think I'm not sure, there may be none at the start. So if you can get a monopoly of the green ones, it means that you can basically put a green one against a tile, nobody else can compete, which is very helpful. So if somebody gets green ones, you really want somebody else to get green ones as well, so that they can compete. Otherwise, they'll just mop up tiles with the green pieces. But
you can
the
see
key,
there's half as many in the stock from the
the,
components.
the key here, if I can use that word in that context, is of course that you there's no auction phase. You can bid just as an action. Your other actions are processing the things that you've already got in your village. Now, in point of fact, mostly people will bid. They'll tend to bid first because you don't want to be second best at the auctions. So it could have been designed, I suspect, to have an auction phase and then a processing phase. But
I think the key thing. Sorry, I'm using the words myself as well. Now, key this, key that, key mark. But I think one thing to consider is that running your stuff isn't something that can really be blocked by other people, if I remember correctly.
As long as you put more pieces on, you can run it. Yes, but you have to put more pieces, so it's more expensive if somebody's already done it. There's no maximums. Which is good. And you can put production. You can actually produce,
because what I'm saying is when you're producing, it's only on your own village, as you can.
No. If it's, you can produce
in
on
other players'
something.
villages, and yes.
You can
Sorry,
produce
I totally misread
anywhere you like. Now, the thing is, if you produce in somebody else's village, they gain those meeples. So you have to be, which is, that doesn't mean to say that you don't do it. But you definitely do, because it can be worthwhile. Because don't forget,
Okay,
you're giving them a piece, but you're also depriving them of the use of that unless they pay a lot more.
I totally missed that. So listen to Alan and not to me.
You can also produce on the current season's tiles, which are being bid for. Again, it has to be the same color. So if somebody's bid for something, you could produce on it, but that means you're giving a piece or pieces to the person who wins that tile. So there's a lot going on. It's a really, really clever multi-layered mechanism for auctions. And it's the thing that makes Keyflower stand out. And I think it's the thing that makes Keyflower so popular with people that like this kind of action placement and bidding game. It's excellent implementation for that. And we've played quite a lot of Keyflower, but as I said, mainly during development. The only wrinkle I wasn't that keen on myself was that you also, right at the start, you decide about some tiles you're going to keep for the final round auction, the winter tiles. So you actually keep those. Now,
and do you feel like that's front-loading too much decision?
Yeah, that's what I found, because you literally, I think you keep one. So you have to make a strategic choice right at the start of the game other people like this, so don't take my word for it, but you're making a strategic choice right at the start when you don't know what your strategy is going to be or what any of your opponent's strategies are going to be, and you're locked into that tile. And when it comes to the winter, you put those tiles into play for auction. So it may be by that time you don't want it, or it may be better for somebody else than for you. So I just wasn't that keen on that little wrinkle, but that's just a personal view. So other people love it.
I think it is very, it's got the most.
It's very highly rated,
and it's ranked 92 out of all of the games on Board Game Geek.
It's a very popular.
We are biased because I consider Sebastian Bleasdale and Richard Breeze to be, at least I'm friendly with them, if not like best buddies. But like, I see Sebastian Bleasdale increasingly regularly at the Friday daytime playtest, and I saw Richard Breeze at London Toy Fair, and we
Yeah.
had a very
Yes.
short chat and had a selfie.
We
And
are
but
friends with
it,
both Sebastian and Richard. Richard Brees was our first kind of game designer that we met. We met Richard way back when we first went to Essen Spiel, and he helped us. He was in the next door stand. He helped us immensely and has done this over the years. And we've done a lot of playtesting with Richard, both of our own
just to
games
get that bias out of the way.
and his.
But
Yep.
I think that, the ratings do corroborate that this is a brilliant game, which I think that I haven't really delved into it as much as I would like. I was just kind of skimming through a game on Board Game Arena, maybe not understanding things as well as I ought to. And I think it is, as you said earlier, the fact that it's fixed placement auctions allows you to bring in all these other things going on because you put down your pieces and hey, this is me, and then you can go back to your other stuff. And it's not just, if it was just one, it's kind of analogous to a market row where a market row can coexist with other actions.
Yeah.
And it feels like I hate to use this phrase, but I can't think of a better one. It feels like market row on steroids. Like a fixed placement auction is kind of like a market row on steroids, where you can do that and then do other stuff and then do that. And
yes,
yeah,
definitely. The really interesting thing about the Keyflower implementation and the way it mixes the actions up nicely is that there may be a tile in another person's village that you really want to play on, right? In order to get the income that particular process, and also to increase the cost for that player to play it. But on the other hand, there may be an auction that you may want to make a bid, which is really important to you as well. And you have to decide which one. So, damn it, if I bid there, then I won't have used that tile. And then my opponent might use that tile, or somebody else might come in and use it. And I really need that. So you're definitely having to assess the value of your action every single time you do one. And bidding is only one action.
and
So having a
constrain
plan of many
large
strands.
number of resources. It's not just one thing that you bid with, like gold. It's all of these colors of meeples.
Yes, yeah. So you have to bear in mind how many meeples of each color you think each player has got. I mean, you can't necessarily track it all because you have a screen by which you put your meeples behind a screen so that nobody can see what your actual resources are. But you can remember very often, you suddenly you realize, now that person hasn't acquired many meeples openly from other people's bids, so maybe they haven't got very many meeples left. So if I bid two, they might not. If I bid 2 blues, they might not have 3 blues, in which case I'm going to win that one.
And also, because there's 4 different types of resources with which you can bid, that first bid, which determines the type of resources that you can use to win that particular auction, is very interesting.
Yeah, so if I've got 6 blues, then I'm thinking, well, I can probably win any blue bid, which is fantastic. So I just have to I bid 1, and then somebody else might want to come in with 2, but I know I can outbid it, so I'm not worried about that. It's really clever. And of course, the other little wrinkle is because you have to overbid. If I bid 2 and you've only got 2, you can't outbid me. So you have to do something else.
I mean,
it's a very clever design.
I mean, that's inherent in all auction games. But by dividing the currency into 4 different forms, it makes it chunkier and less granular.
Yes.
And by making it less granular, it means that there's these exciting decisions where the difference between 1 and 2 and 3
matters
very great. So much more.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get rather high bids of like that. 6 is unheard of.
6 is, well, I've seen it, but it's quite rare. You see, sometimes it's a victory point tile which you really, really, really want, or it's something which really cheaply converts stone into victory points. You may really, really, really want that because you've got loads of stone, so you may be prepared to outbid everybody on it, even if it is 6.
And so it reminds us that, like, what I've noticed from Keyflower is there's so many wrinkles, like the mixing together of different actions with the bidding, which is done because of the fixed placement auction,
Yep.
but also the multiple resources with which to bid. And has that been done? I mean, I'm sure there's, but do you know any other games in which that's been done? Because to me, that's a real lovely bit of it.
I
Saying,
don't think
I want to
so,
bid,
actually.
but you can only bid on this
Yeah.
thing. And that could only be done in a fixed placement auction, I think. But it does feel like there's a possibility, although I guess you could do it in a pass turn order until pass auction, although then there'd only be one thing, so then
Yeah.
it would be a bit sad because the first player has so much.
The interesting thing,
It kind of reminds me of a trick-taking game in a way.
the interesting thing again about Keyflower is you're not using conventional resources like gold or wood or stone to bid with. You're bidding with your workers. So the alternative use for your workers is to do some work, to actually do the processing and make stuff. But here you're using workers to bid. I think there are other games that do have that mechanism, using workers to bid or to do work, but they're not usually multiple types, not multiple colors. So that does make Keyflower stand out well.
And did you
It's a lovely. I think I'm
um,
not sure who did the auction, whether it was Sebastian or Richard. I'm not absolutely certain who did that actually. Which one of the two? Maybe that came up jointly, which is quite possible. It's a lovely, but it's a
like
lovely mechanism.
to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, it feels like there's a scope for an auction game where unsuccessful bids or successful bids, you still get those workers back, and the payment is simply that you didn't get to use the workers, but everyone else still gets to use those workers. I mean, but the other thing that I really want to say is the analog between multiple multiple hands of a trick taking game going on at once, and Keyflower, I think I would like to explore that for just a minute, because it is almost like you're playing a trick taking game with no trump, and you put
Yes.
it down, and then everyone else has to play higher, or except in this version, they have the possibility of passing and saying, no, I don't want to play my card. But is there the possibility of something where you are actually just playing cards and you're playing a hand of cards and then you're forced to play somewhere and card playing, and that feels like a game?
There are some trading games that do that kind of thing where you have a bunch of cards which are goods and you are effectively bidding for those lots. I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of it. It has cards with gems on, and you are using cards to bid for those lots. Anyway, you could certainly implement this kind of auction with cards. That wouldn't be difficult. And the advantage you have there is it's cheaper to produce, which is always good. I say as with my publisher hat on.
And it says, Bez is in the UK. I have COVID. Life is sad, and lots of love. And I do hope that you.
I'm sorry to hear.
Quickly.
I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, we have just been told that there was quite a lot of COVID going around Retford Moot over the weekend. So we're doing tests today to see if we've got COVID. Charlie's tested negative. Hurrah! I haven't done my test yet, so I'm all right at the moment. But you never know. I might suddenly find I have COVID this afternoon.
The better part of the hour just talking about our examples, and yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there with you. Lots of love. But how do fixed placements auctions impact a game? I feel like they inherently give you more to think about, and they make you aware um, straight away that you're not going to win everything, and
Yeah.
they kind of front load you with information because it's not just one
Yes.
thing at a time. It's like all of this stuff going on because it has to. Well, this is an inherent value of multiple. Actually, I'm talking about multiple lots. How would you say fixed? How would you say fixed price auction? Fixed.
Fixed placement auctions. I mean, fixed placement auctions are multiple lot, so it has some of the same constraints there in that you have to assess each lot's value at the start. So that there's automatic information you have to process, and in order to process the value, like any auction, you have to look at how it impacts the rest of the game. So there is the main effect it has on experience at the table is it does require a lot of thought, and it automatically gives you player interaction. That's how, I mean, obviously, like any auction, you've got player interaction because you're all at the same time assessing the value of each lot in comparison with your own specific objectives in the game, and that will vary, which is the power of all auctions, really. And that's why it's such a great mechanism, such a great way of divvying up resources between players. I think that's the main impact. And how it differs from the others is it gives the designer a lot of control over the gap between one bid and the next bid up.
Yeah,
So in Keyflower, as we've discussed in Keyflower, the difference between 2 pieces and 3 pieces might be a hell of a lot. So 3 pieces might be all of your pieces that you've got to auction in that color. Whereas in something like Amun-Re, the step up might be most of your gold just to put that bid down. So massive impact, but it gives the designer a lot of control over how that bidding mechanism should work and what impact it should have. In other words, you can make it central, and usually I think this type of auction is central part of the game.
I mean, I almost wish that we had done multiple lot auctions first and done it out of order, given that this is a modifier to multiple lot auctions. But look, multiple lot auctions do most of the work here, in my opinion, in giving you stuff to consider and not just having auction, but allowing these free auctions to entangle and entwine. And it's bigger than the sum of its parts. There's more going on.
Yes.
But then fixed placement, I think, brings it back down, and there's a crunchy little decision space where you think, well, with fixed values, you think, well, I want to bid 5, but I can't. I've got to bid either 6 or 3, and which is better.
Yes.
And so by constraining it gives you both guidance, but also those little, that's not quite what I want to do, which is really nice. And I think that by having a rule in terms of where you can go, like in Keyflower, of you've got to pay the same sort of resource, it just kind of narrows it down to okay, now I'm able to have some prediction over the course of the game, and I get a better idea of what's going to happen, because I do feel like, yes, by having more constraints, it does give you more information of what other people are thinking and what they might do. It allows you to better predict their actions.
It kind of directs how people should think about value, which is helpful in auction games. It gives, well, it literally gives more structure, doesn't it? Which can be an advantage. And I'm quite heavily into structure. I tend to design quite structured games, really, myself.
Do you think that most auction games could be modified to be multiple lots and indeed to be fixed placements?
I not really. No, I think it's a difficult one. It needs to be a fairly complex game. It lends itself to complex games because people are having to get their head around the different values of the bids, and those are fixed, by definition. So you have to understand that. And you in some games, I guess you could even have different fixed values for different lots, which would be another interesting wrinkle. And it's versatile for what it is. But I would say that there is this danger of information overload at the start. If you've got lots of, like a lot of multiple lot auctions, if you've got a heck of a lot, I mean, Homestead seemed to me to have quite a lot of information overload potentially there for new players. It makes it harder for new players to get in there and access that game, because if you look at Homesteader, not only do you have to work out how much am I going to bid, that relates to what I'm going to do with my purchase if I win the bid, and then I have to look at that array of cards to work out which ones I want, and those have all got a cost and an impact on the rest of the game. So there's a lot going on in Homesteader.
I think multiple lot auctions are inherently more
More
complex than
complex, yeah, they are.
single lot
Yeah.
auctions. I've just looked ahead and to
Oh,
note
right.
that there are 25 games on Board Game Geek
Mhm.
with multiple lot auctions. 18 of those have fixed placements. So I think we can say that the majority of multiple lot auctions do
Fixed
indeed
place.
have fixed placements. So it's almost, I would say that either way, this is something that's going to take over the game. I think we've already said that any auction game, any trading game, these are mechanisms that do potentially overpower a game. I don't know a better way to say that, but you can't have a small auction element really.
No, it has
And
to be quite large.
I think that fixed placement auctions, if we say that that's kind of like a market rule on steroids, and multiple lots are kind of like auctions on steroids, then it kind of makes sense that this is even more so. I mean, any one of these games, it is so much about the auctions that it needs to be built up from the ground up. And yes, it's not something you can just add to another game, I would say. I think it has to be the primary mechanism.
Yes, I would agree. It's also interesting if you look at the list of multiple lot auction games. A lot of them are Richard Breeze's key games, or Richard Breeze's games. Aladdin's Dragons, not key game. Aladdin's Dragons is one. Keyflower we've done in detail. We've also got Key to the City, which is loosely based on the Keyflower. Kingdom's Dragons. So yeah, Richard uses that a lot in his games, and there's a good reason, because they give you a good flavor, very good decision making on all of those. The only one of those I haven't played, I think, is Kingdom. Actually, I've played the rest. They're very, very good games, but they are that level of complexity, which I don't know. Would you call it medium heavy? I don't know, or maybe it's just medium. They're usually games which are going to last more than an hour or so.
I mean, we
Up
can
to
see
2 hours.
that the
They're
weight
quite
of these
complex.
games
The weight is
it is
relatively.
3.3 to
Yeah,
2.6, 2.8, 2.95. So,
yeah,
yeah,
they're quite
medium heavy.
medium heavy. Yeah.
But when do you think it's good? When should a designer use it, and who would enjoy it? I mean, it seems to be again something that tends towards complexity, something that tends towards a deep web of.
Yeah.
It is
People
inherently interactive.
who like analytical, interactive games.
Mm,
I think those. So because you have to be able to assess value.
yes.
Well, to play well. I mean, maybe you just like them, but you're not very good at them. That's absolutely fine. But you do have to be able to analyze. Otherwise, you can get AP, and I'm renowned for occasionally getting a bit stuck. So yeah, that
And
can be a problem.
You've talked about the analysis paralysis, and obviously people who don't like that much interaction or don't like that web of complexity aren't going to enjoy this. Are there any other things that you should consider before deciding that I'm going to make a fixed placement auction?
Yes. Is it appropriate for the weight of the game is the main thing. I mean, you don't want to just bung something in because it feels like you need a way of doing resources. Sometimes it's appropriate just to deal out resources randomly. I think there has to be a good definition of the resource, like the provinces in Amun-Re. They are well defined, and there are differences between them. If all the resources are more or less the same in terms of value,
or maybe
then
just do some sort of quick pick and pass.
Yes, yeah.
System.
So I think it is bad if the game. It's bad if the auction doesn't really mean all that much.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. That it's a web of complexity only if winning something as opposed to this other thing actually has a meaningful point.
Impact. Yes.
And the really interesting thing about Homesteaders is that sometimes the difference between two things might not be as much as you would think, especially in the earlier levels. And I never actually mentioned, but there's 3 decks that first.
Right.
So in stages, I think 1 to 5, you use 1, or it might be 1 to 4. In the first few stages, you use one thing, and the next few stages, you use the other thing, and in stage 10, you use stuff from the final deck. But if it's like, okay, here I can build residential or commercial. Here I can build residential. But what if I want to build a residential? Well, then for me, it's equal. But I've also got to think about my opponents. What might they want?
Yes.
But then it's about there has to be enough of a difference. And I think Homesteaders accentuates this by having the pass mechanism.
Yes.
By having that interesting, I'm just going to step out.
Yeah.
And if you've got something like Amun-Re, where everyone is going to end up with one thing, then you absolutely have to make sure that those things are wildly differentiated in terms of value, whether that becomes in terms of absolute value or whether that's in terms of the situational value.
Yes, but they have to be enough. Each one has to be enough so that somebody's not going to feel really frustrated that they always get the worst ones. So the bidding has to be meaningful. So the issue, and we talk about issues when adding it to a game, it's getting the values of the fixed bids correct for what you want. So there has to be, it has to mean something. If you miss, you want people to agonize about whether to go the next bid up or not. If you make it a trivial gap, then it becomes a trivial decision. So it needs to be a step up. And sometimes it does need to be, you do need to manufacture those situations where people can't bid because they haven't got enough resources to bid with. And so that means they have to take that into account when they're starting to bid. So, I won't bid on my favorite one. I'll sucker everybody else in and bid on something else. And then you find somebody's really bid on the one you wanted and bid too high for you. So you want those kinds of decisions to come in with this kind of auction. It has to be tricksy decisions, I think.
Yes.
That's quite.
And like Keyflower, it's all about getting that balance right.
Keyflower has that really nice thing about I can commit a particular color, and if I've got most of that color, I know I can win that one. Even if I haven't got overall more meeples than my opponent, if I've got more of one color, I know I can win. And that's such a lovely way of doing it.
So have we used it in any games? I haven't thus far. Have you, Alan?
No, I haven't. I don't.
Do you feel inspired to make something with a fixed placement auction now?
I think I would like to do that. I quite like the idea of the card game with fixed placement auctions as part of what you can do, and somehow
so do I
work that in. Yeah, a card game would be nice because generally they tend to be kind of worker placement type games, but if you spin it down to its purest possible implementation, that might be quite interesting. So you want to have here you go. If it's multiple lots, the minimum lots you got is 2, right? Or 1 per player, perhaps. and then you want to have something to bid with, which is obviously cards. So you might. I quite like nicking the Keyflower idea of having a particular color is used against a particular lot. It's quite nice. Going less than one per player might be a bit too tricksy, unless we combine it with some kind of reasonable compensation if you don't win one of the lots. So you might squeeze somebody out, which really increases the nature of a bid.
I
Go
mean,
for one
with
less,
Keyflower,
one lot less than the number of players might be fun.
there is the slight challenge of you need to play on a certain side, and as soon as you bring in cards, that's a lot of table space that you've got to use. And so,
Yes.
because if you imagine, like, instead of
Yes.
and
Well,
what I like the idea of it. I don't feel like I'm going to rush to make something, but what I do come away with the idea for that I might explore a little bit is a trick-taking game where rather than the tricks having value based on the cards that are played, the cards that are played are just there to determine who wins it, and then the value is determined by what you're playing the cards on. But maybe you only play the cards on one thing at a time. It's something I'd have to ponder more, but it seems like an interesting idea.
yes, I quite like the idea of experimenting with having multiple lots, one less than the number of players,
Mm-hmm.
and then a compensation is you gain something which increases your things you can buy with. That might be quite.
Yeah, I mean, if
So
it was a Keyflower system, maybe you get one more meeple of each color,
yeah,
or
exactly,
two
that kind of
meeples
thing.
of any color you choose. I don't know
Yes.
if the former was overpowered.
Oh,
So,
I'm going to ponder that now. Oh dear, I've got too many things to do. Never mind.
all
It's
good.
going
I
to have to be.
mean, so it's been a lovely chat, and as always, I like to finish up with the question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day. Do you have a question, Alan?
Well, I was wondering, what is your favourite mechanic for a party game?
Huh, that sounds
Yes,
left field.
that's right.
Um,
I mean,
is
I
real
don't really
time a mechanic?
I think it has to be a bit more than just real time.
I mean,
Well, I mean, real time snatching of cards is a favoured one that you have, which is nice.
well, in my designs, yeah. I mean, slapping things
Oh,
is something that I think brings inherent joy. If there's things on the table and it's, I was the first there, boom.
yeah.
I think that I'm trying to determine how I would think of a party game. So the way I'm answering this question is I'm thinking, okay, hypothetically, what do I count as a party game? And how expansive is that? And what would I put in? What would my hypothetical favorite party game look like? And it doesn't have to
Well,
be so.
it has to be lots of players. It has to take lots of players as a party.
Absolutely, it has to be something that you jump in and jump
Yeah,
out.
yes, and you learn it
And
in about a minute.
yeah, or less. And it has to be something that, um, ideally for me, an ideal party game is something where you're learning about the other players, which is why,
Mm.
even though it's not my favorite mechanic, the judging mechanic or the does go really well with this, as does word association, as does social deduction,
Mm.
because then you learn a little bit more about the players. It's not just, okay, who can slap these things fastest, because while sure, that's a nice party game, and it's once you've designed a few of, like once you've designed a bunch of any given mechanic, it's easier to do more with that
Yeah.
mechanic. But I would say that actually, I feel like I'm going to say for me, it comes between social deduction and word association, and I'm going to say word association because social deduction can inherently make some people uncomfortable.
Yeah,
But
sure.
word association combined with cooperation, because then instantly you get everyone on the same boat, you get people jumping in and jumping out. So
I do
yeah.
like games which have some creativity, creation of something, and evaluation afterwards. So that the judging is quite good. I mean, a lovely game that our friend Neo designed, which basically you're given a concept, and you have to describe that concept using a 3x3 grid of colored cubes, and that I don't think there were cubes actually, but anyway, 3x3 colors. That was a beautiful one, because once everybody had once all the other players had described it, then the person who chose the concept would evaluate the pictures, and the thing there is you can talk about why those particular pictures epitomize that particular concept, or why they don't. Why it works for you as a person, and not for somebody else. That's a really nice thing, because it's creative in the sense that you are creating a piece of artwork effectively, but it's not that difficult, because you've only got 3x3 grid of colors, with constrained colors, because it's the particular squares or cubes that you've got to use. So it's relatively easy to access for people, but most of the fun of the game, if you like, isn't to do with scoring or stuff. It's to do with discussing the meaning of the concept in relation to the picture you've drawn. Now, that's really a lovely, almost therapeutic kind of approach to cooperative gaming, and I like that.
Yeah, and I do think that with player judge, there's a lot more that could be done. But we'll get to that another day.
Yes, indeed.
And
Great. Thank you for
over
those
to you. What are you
answers.
up to? You can share botany if you want to. One thing that I'm kind of excited about is I've got a couple of meetings today, and I'm going to make sure that I do head out and send some money to someone via the bank. Which it's a nice wee cycle. It's about 50 minutes, not too far. But yes, that's what I'm up to. And there's a game that I've pledged to prototype before Friday, which is a customizable deck,
Oh,
um,
right. Mm.
a deck construction game. So not a deck building game, something where you're not building your deck. And so for the first playtest, I'm not going to have the deck construction be part of the playtest. It's just okay. Well, and my design objective is: can you make a deck construction game where the decks are about 20 cards each?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's my design goal,
Brilliant.
and we'll see how that works out.
Excellent.
How about you? Is there anything that
Well,
you want to
I
share?
mean,
Something you have to do? Something you
yeah.
need to do?
I'd like to share. Would you like to see the latest iteration of the box cover for Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom?
I would.
Let's just. And this isn't
And
final.
by the way, I did put the poll up on Twitter, and I don't know if you saw, there were 4 votes for Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom, and 2 votes for Last Bug Standing. So lots and lots of votes. But people do tend to prefer the longer title, at least those people who are following me.
Right, here we go. This is the first time that Bez has seen this, so
Oh,
bear
wow.
in mind. Look at
That
that.
is really,
See.
it reminds me of B movies. I like it.
Good. That's
It
what it's
does.
supposed to do. Excellent. Yes.
And
So there we have. Yeah. So those are the you can see the bugs. There's 4 bugs, which you can just make out, and we've got the characters, almost like the kind of actors in the movie: the navigator, the driver of the vehicle, and the gunner. So that is, we're quite excited about this, actually. I really like that. And we are, as you can see, getting on well with the artwork. So those will be represented in the game itself. Yeah, it's quite exciting now. Yeah,
I do
we're
really
getting
like
there.
the typography with that slight bend. That's a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nice logo.
Good.
Um,
Excellent.
Digging it. Thank you very much for showing that. And To recap and wrap up before we finish up, we chatted about what was our brilliant thing? Cooperation. We talked about cooperation and how that's a lovely thing. We talked about um, Siberius, which I'll talk about more another day. Bandido, which I've come to maybe understand. I don't love it myself, but I've a deeper appreciation of, and that's always a nice thing. If a game's doing well, I think it behooves any game designer to understand why it's doing well, not just dismiss it out of hand because it doesn't suit your personal tastes.
Yeah.
And we talked about Keyflower, Amun-Re, Homesteaders, free games that use fixed placement auctions well, two of them do it in subtly different ways. Keyflower does it in a very different way. And I think that's because it's so out there, I think that's part of why people respect it so much. And we both agreed that this is an incredibly interactive and system with a web that makes it a little bit more thinky than other forms of auctions. I mean, having multiple lots for a start, but then saying, okay, you can only do auctions under these certain rules, it both makes it, constrains it so that it gives you those crunchy decisions, but also giving you a little bit of guidance, both of which are lovely. And we decided that party games are also lovely things.
We did.
And if you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places. Tomorrow I might be chatting to Kirsten Runda, but share, spread the word. And if you would like to find Alan Paull, Alan, where do you like to be found?
I am on Alan at alanpaul.co.uk or at surprisetagggames.co.uk. I am Bentham Fish on Twitter, and I'm Alan Paull on BGG. And I have a blog if you'd like to. It's on the Surprise Tech Games site, and please do have a look at my blog and maybe even subscribe, and then you get updates for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the only thing left to say at this point is share, spread the word. If you felt like this was a helpful show, then obviously telling other people or just writing a little comment saying, hey, I enjoyed that is really appreciated. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Most importantly, thank you, Alan, for joining me for these chats. And I guess we'll be back I was going to say about, I mean, it depends how, well, when I say about, maybe 2 weeks minus 1.5 hours.
Okay.
Well, yeah, basically exactly 2 weeks. We will be back in 2 weeks.
We will be back in 2 weeks, yes. Yeah, unless I happen to be in the middle of moving out of my house. That's a whole different story. Let's not do that now.
For now, the only thing left to say is, as always, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.
Bye.